From the global news network of Breitbart.com, this is Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow on SiriusXM Patriot 125.
Right, back to work. Senator Tom Cotton is with me, Republican from Arkansas. And the senator has shown some terrific leadership on both the issues of China and big tech censorship. And I'm going to spend most of our time on those topics. But, Senator, are you in Tennessee today? I know you're really heavily involved in that race.
Not quite yet, Alex. I am in Washington for another day of Senate business. But as soon as we're done, I'm going to get on a plane and head down to Nashville and celebrate Bill Hagerty's big victory.
This is a really interesting race because I feel like half of my favorite Republicans have come out strong for Hagerty and the other half have come out strong for Sethi in this primary. Why do you think this race has gotten so much attention? And I know Matt Boyle is out there, our Washington political editor. He's going to be out there, I think, particularly following the Hagerty people around today. But this has been a real big one.
Alex, that brings to mind the old politician's joke that some of my friends are for it and some of my friends are against it. None with my friends. I'm very pleased to join President Trump and Marsha Blackburn and Sean Hannity and several other leading conservative voices in America to support Bill Hagerty. I think he will be a great senator. You know, he was with Donald Trump throughout the general election in 2016. Raising lots of money for that campaign when it was underfunded compared to the Democrats' money machine, and at a time when it wasn't very popular in a lot of circles, to include in some circles of Tennessee Republican politics, to support the president. The president obviously has great esteem for Bill Hagerty. First, he worked on the transition team, and then he was our ambassador to Japan. He was on the front lines of the fight against China. And then the president didn't just endorse Bill Hagerty. The president basically asked Bill Hagerty to leave that position in Japan and run for this Senate seat. So I was glad to be there campaigning a couple weeks ago for Bill and excited to be there tonight to celebrate his big victory and encourage everyone in Tennessee who's listening, if you haven't had a chance to vote yet, please go to the polls today and pull the lever for Bill Hagerty. He'll be a great ally of mine in the United States Senate.
And we're going to have a lot of information on this race throughout the day and the next couple of days because Boyle's out there, as I mentioned. So, Senator, let's turn focus to the two huge topics, starting with big tech. There were two monumental stories that Breitbart was involved in since we spoke last. First of all, the censoring of actual medical doctors by the entirety of the big tech establishment. Remember, Breitbart never endorsed any of the opinions. A lot of these folks are board certified, highly qualified. I'm not saying I defend every single line in the hours of hearings and testimony that we broadcast, Senator, but all of this memory hole from the internet and Breitbart reporting on the clear-cut censorship that's taking place, particularly by Google, of not just Breitbart, but all conservative voices. What is your reaction to these stories?
Well, I think the censoring of Breitbart and other conservative news sites by Google is very alarming. That's why I've written to Sundar Pichai about it, and I've also asked the Attorney General to look into and expand their antitrust probe into Google. Alex, while we're on the line here, I typed Joel Pollak into Google's search engine. Not a single hit for Breitbart on the front page. I typed Alex Marlow into Google search engine. Not a single hit for Breitbart on the first page. And then I went to one of Google's competitors, DuckDuckGo. Right there, very first link for both of you is Breitbart.
Wow.
What does that tell you about what does that tell you about what Google is doing to Breitbart, a source of conservative news? And as you've also covered in the past, there appears to be a systematic effort to remove or at least rank substantially lower Breitbart's coverage of Joe Biden. All this is troubling under any circumstances, especially troubling as we lead up to an election season, to see one of the huge monopoly search engines in this country manipulating search results by all appearances to favor the Democratic Party. I've asked the Department of Justice to look into this, to expand their antitrust probe into it, and I hope they do just that.
Do you believe that this is election interference or potential election interference, or at a minimum, does it compromise some of the integrity of the election, that you have these big search giants?
Why else would Google be suppressing a conservative news site or suppressing news about Joe Biden? I mean, they're not suppressing news about the Chicago Bears. They're not suppressing news about the weather, they're suppressing political news that's critical of the Democrats. What else do you think it is? I mean, they all admit that they're run by a bunch of young left-wingers. I mean, look at what happened last week in Minneapolis when our friends at the Powerline blog, John Hinderrocker, hosted Heather McDonald for us to talk about policing. And they posted the video on YouTube, and it was taken down within just a few hours. I mean, when was the last time you heard, Talking Points memo or Daily Kos or MSNBC having a story or an article or a video censored? Oh, we're sorry, they say at Google. We're sorry, they say at YouTube. That was just an inadvertent mistake. Our algorithm just screwed up. We didn't mean to censor Rachel Maddow. We'll put it back up. It never happens. It never happens. It always seems to happen that their accidents and their slip-ups are designed to censor conservatives.
Senator,
how that works.
Yeah, and if you look at the first page, if you Google Alex Marlow, the first page, you're going to get a link from PBS, from a PBS interview I did a few years ago, because that's what people really associate
Alex
with.
Marlow, I think PBS.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's we laugh so we don't cry. So what can be done about it? First of all, you've got a few places that can act: executive branch, including the DOJ, and the Congress, Senate. What do you think is on the table? Is there anything that can be done in the next 88 days or whatever it is until election? And what can be done long term?
Sure, Alex. So legislation may be a long-term answer, and we'll explore those possibilities. But in these next 88 days, the Department of Justice has the power to act and to act quickly. That's why I've asked them to promptly expand their antitrust probe, to look into exactly what Google is doing, and to ensure that this is a issue that is front and center for the American people. Not just that they know that the news they're seeing on Google may be skewed, but also so they appreciate the danger of giving some of these giant tech companies the power to determine what we read and what we see. Again, I mean, Google is a monopoly in the search market. There's no doubt about it. There are competitors like DuckDuckGo, but Google has monopoly power in the search market. Google cannot use that monopoly power to then try to get a monopoly and harm competitors in other markets as well, like, say, the digital advertising market. I mean, that is almost a per se violation of our antitrust laws. That's why the Department of Justice has begun this probe, and some state attorneys general are following on. I would encourage them to expand and look into this issue too.
One other thing I wanted to ask specifically about as we see platforms censoring videos from the president, et cetera, I'm wondering why this is not more of a clear-cut rallying cry for conservatives in Washington. And then I looked at it, and I did what you're always in Washington. You follow the money, and you see how much some of these big tech companies are donating to conservatives. And do you think it is appropriate to continue to accept money from Google, Facebook, et cetera? These are some of the biggest lobbying arms now in the world or in the country, are some of these big tech giants, and they're not just targeting Democrats. What is to be done about this, and what is to be done? Just give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that any public official needs to call it as he sees it. And as you see it right now, with a company like Google, there's no question that they are manipulating results for some reason in some way related to Breitbart. There's just no way that Alex Marlow and Joe Pollak won't show up on the first page of Google as affiliated with Breitbart. It doesn't DuckDuckGo. And that kind of thing needs to be called out, and it needs to be investigated. And in the long run, we may need to address it with legislation as well.
All right, let's turn to China in the time we have left. You did something very bold yesterday, which is suggesting that basically criminalizing taking money from the Chinese government. What brought you to this conclusion, and give us some of the thought behind it?
So Alex, let me back up and contextualize it for your listeners. So sure. China has what they call talent programs, the most important and biggest of which is called the 1,000 Talents Program. That is a means by which the Chinese Communist Party, the People's Liberation Army, state-owned and state-controlled enterprises will subsidize American researchers, scientists, university professors at some of our most prestigious institutions. The head of Harvard's chemistry department was indicted just a few months ago for this kind of conduct. But here's the thing that's crazy about our law. It's not illegal to take that money. If you're a scientist, a researcher, a professor, especially if you get grants from the Department of Defense or the Department of Energy or the intelligence community, it's not illegal to take money from all of these Chinese entities. So the indictments that you end up seeing are for things like failure to report or failure to disclose on federal forms or wire fraud or bank fraud. We had a similar case in Arkansas at the University of Arkansas with a longtime engineering professor. Again, the underlying conduct of taking the money, especially if you have federal funds supporting your research, is not a crime. So we have to pursue these people who are on the take from China with these process crimes. We should just make the act of taking the money a crime. If you're getting research funds from the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy, you should not be taking money as well from companies that are affiliated with the People's Liberation Army or the Chinese Communist Party.
So one of the big debates out there has been what to do about TikTok, which is a Chinese social media app that is harvesting our data, collecting it, and giving it to the Chinese government, which is all companies in China operate at the behest of the government. That's the nature of the communist regime. Talk to us, what are the options on what to do about TikTok?
There's only two options, Alex. It has to sever all ties, every single one, with ByteDance, its Chinese parent, or with China entirely. Or it has to be banned from the United States. Most of the users of TikTok just experience it as a fun video sharing app. And that's what it looks like when you touch the app on the screen of your phone. What you don't see is the back end, which is a Trojan horse for the data on your phone. It vacuums up your email, your text messages, your photographs, your browser history, even your keystrokes. All that goes back to servers in China, which means all that data about you is accessible to the Chinese Communist Party. We cannot continue to allow that threat to the privacy and the security, especially to our children. So if it's possible to sever ties entirely, so Microsoft is exploring a purchase of TikTok's U.S. operations and some of their other non-China operations. If that's possible, and I don't just mean putting servers and data in the United States, it has to sever all ties, no source code, no algorithms, no Chinese-based employees. It has to sever everything. Then that would make TikTok safe for American users. If that is not possible, if they're not willing or able to do that, then
Sure.
TikTok cannot be allowed to operate in the U.S. anymore. It's too dangerous for our kids.
Yeah, and the question is, how would they be willing to do that? And if they were willing to do it, how do we know it actually gets executed?
So, I mean, I have confidence in the ability of Microsoft, which is a major defense contractor as well, to do the technical assessment and be able to present it to the federal government. And the federal government has a lot of great experts in this area, whether it's at the NSA or the Department of Energy or the CIA or what have you. I would expect, though, as a condition of approving the sale, the administration would also insist on something like what's known as a special master in a court case, someone who is embedded in a new U.S. TikTok who has the technical expertise to monitor and ensure that new U.S.-based TikTok, which is owned by Microsoft, actually has severed all those ties, and all those ties remain completely severed.
And I'll just put this out there that I'm concerned that even if we solve that problem, that'll create a new problem, which is that Microsoft will start doing to conservatives exactly what their counterparts in Silicon Valley have done. But I guess we could cross that bridge at another time. Senator Tom Cotton, Republican, Arkansas. Last question for today. We can connect a couple of dots here. I'm seeing things like the ratings for the NBA have been very bad. The NBA very woke on China, very woke on President Trump and guns and Black Lives Matter, not so much on China. Hollywood, a big study coming out showing that Hollywood's self-censoring on behalf of China. I think this is going to really hurt Hollywood's box office. People are really starting to get the picture that China is an evil actor on the world stage for the most part. And it is, I think, going to affect the way Americans do business. Are you seeing this trend? Are you heartened by it? Or do you think it's not moving fast enough?
No, I think most Americans do recognize that China poses a threat in so many ways, whether it's a threat of their military against our sailors and airmen and soldiers and Marines who are in the Western Pacific, or a threat against our kids from vacuuming up their personal data on TikTok. And more Americans want to see the United States stand up to China, whether it's elected officials in Washington or Hollywood, who is particularly notorious for caving to China and takes a lot of Chinese money into its motion pictures or its studios in general. I think there's deep disappointment in the NBA in particular for the way they've interacted with China, when in reality, the NBA has more leverage than any other industry dealing with China. You look at our farmers.
Absolutely.
If China doesn't buy, our farm commodities, then, they can buy them from Australia or Brazil or Argentina. They can't go anywhere else for NBA basketball, though. I mean, NBA basketball has a monopoly, and they have 500 million rabid fans in China. So the NBA would have unusual leverage to stand up to Chinese Communist Party intimidation and demands, yet they refuse to do so, which is deeply disappointing. I think that is one reason why you've seen a decline in ratings. In addition to just the general sense that for most people, they use sports as an escape to get away from the news or work or what have you, and the idea that you can sit down next to someone at an arena or a ballpark who's diametrically opposed to your politics but still root for the same team. As sports gets politicized, I think it kind of takes that rationale for watching a game away from a lot of Americans.
Wise words, Senator Cotton. Always a pleasure. Come back soon.
Thank you, Alex.
We'll be right back.